My beloved child. Do not move past this moment too quickly, because what you are about to hear carries an emotion that has been building quietly through the night. Pause here for a moment. There is a reason these words found you now, and there is a reason your heart may feel strangely alert as you listen. Last night, while the world grew silent and countless lights disappeared behind closed curtains, someone connected to your heart remained awake far longer than they expected. Your soulmate tried to rest. They tried to close their eyes. They tried to convince themselves that morning would make everything easier. But sleep would not come, because every time the room became quiet, one thought returned with greater force. That thought was you. They did not begin the night intending to think about you. In fact, they may have spent the evening deliberately distracting themselves. They looked at ordinary things. They moved through familiar routines. They told themselves they were fine. They may even have laughed at something, answered someone casually, or acted as though nothing inside them had changed. But when the noise faded, their emotions became impossible to escape. There are feelings people can hide in daylight because life keeps moving around them. Night is different. Night removes the audience. It removes the distractions. It leaves a person alone with every word they never said, every memory they tried to bury, and every truth they hoped would become easier if ignored long enough. Last night, your soulmate reached that kind of silence. At first, it was not dramatic. It began as a small memory. Something about you crossed their mind unexpectedly. Perhaps it was the way you once spoke to them when they were uncertain. Perhaps it was a look you gave them that they pretended not to notice. Perhaps it was something painfully ordinary, a phrase you use, a place connected to you, a song that carries an old feeling, or even the memory of your presence in a room. Whatever triggered it seemed harmless for a few seconds. Then one memory opened another, and another opened something deeper. Before long, they were no longer thinking about one moment. They were thinking about everything. This is where the night changed. They realized that certain memories of you had not faded the way they expected. Time had moved, circumstances had shifted, conversations may have changed, and yet something about you remained untouched inside them. They had believed distance would weaken it. They had believed silence would simplify it. They may have even believed that if they stopped looking directly at the feeling would eventually disappear. But last night revealed something they were not prepared to admit. The connection had not vanished. It had only gone quiet. And quiet feelings can become powerful when finally heard. Your soulmate lay there staring into the darkness, asking themselves a question they had avoided for longer than you know: why do I still care this much? It frightened them not because caring is wrong, but because the answer carried consequences. If they admitted what they truly felt, they would also have to admit how much of their behavior had been shaped by fear. They would have to examine every moment when they held back instead of speaking. Every time they chose pride over vulnerability. Every time they acted uncertain when their heart was already leaning toward you. And the deeper they looked, the more uncomfortable the truth became. They were not unable to sleep because something terrible was happening. They were unable to sleep because something honest was happening. Their heart was finally louder than their excuses. There is something I want you to understand about this person. Much of what you may have interpreted as emotional distance was not necessarily emptiness. Some people pull away because they feel nothing. Others pull away because they feel too much and do not know what to do with it. Your soulmate has carried an inner conflict that has been difficult to explain even to themselves. One side wants certainty before taking a step. Another side knows that matters of the heart rarely arrive with guarantees. One side wants to protect themselves from disappointment. Another side quietly wonders whether protecting themselves has already cost them something precious. Last night, those two sides collided. They remembered things they wished they had handled differently. A conversation where they could have been more open. A moment when they sensed you needed reassurance but remained silent. A time when they wanted to reach out and decided against it. Perhaps they convinced themselves that you would not understand, or that the timing was wrong, or that they needed to appear stronger than they felt. But in the stillness of last night, those explanations sounded weaker than before. They began asking themselves what would have happened if they had simply been honest. That question followed them from 1 hour into the next. What if I had said what I actually felt? What if I had stopped overthinking? What if they believed I did not care because I was too afraid to show that I did? And then came the question that changed everything. What if I lose the chance completely? That possibility settled heavily inside them. You see, there is a strange moment that sometimes comes before emotional clarity. A person can spend weeks, months, even years assuming there will always be more time. More time to explain. More time to apologize. More time to understand what they want. More time to say the thing that has been waiting behind their silence. But occasionally, the heart suddenly recognizes that time is not endless. Last night, your soulmate felt that recognition. They imagined a future where you stopped waiting emotionally. Not because you became bitter, but because you became peaceful. They imagined you learning to live without needing an answer from them. They imagined someone else recognizing the value they had been too hesitant to acknowledge openly. And the image disturbed them far more than they expected. Not because you belong to them. You do not belong to anyone. It disturbed them because they suddenly understood that love cannot survive forever on unspoken intentions. A heart can care deeply and still lose an opportunity through silence. This realization kept them awake. At one point, they may have reached for their phone. Their fingers may have hovered over your name, your conversation, your photograph, or something connected to you. They may have wanted to type a message and then erased it before sending. Perhaps the words seemed too simple compared with everything they were feeling. How could they reduce months of confusion into a few lines? How could they suddenly speak as though there had never been distance, hesitation, or unfinished emotion between you? So they put the phone down. But their heart did not put you down. Minutes later, they picked it up again. This is the part you may never have known without hearing this story. They were not searching for the perfect sentence. They were searching for courage. There is a difference. Perfect words are easy to delay. Courage requires a decision. They began imagining what they would say if they were completely honest. Not polished. Not guarded. Not trying to look unaffected. Simply honest. They imagined telling you that certain moments stayed with them. They imagined admitting that they noticed more than they ever revealed. They imagined confessing that your absence sometimes feels heavier than your presence ever did. They imagined saying that whenever they tried to convince themselves the connection meant nothing, something inside them resisted. And then another truth surfaced, one they had buried even deeper. They miss who they were around you. That surprised them. They had always thought missing you meant missing your voice, your attention, your presence. But last night they realized they also missed the version of themselves that appeared when they felt emotionally close to you. Around you, there were moments when they felt understood without needing to perform. Moments when they could imagine a different kind of future. Moments when their defenses lowered just enough for hope to enter. Hope can be frightening to someone who has learned to survive through caution. Your soulmate has not only been questioning their feelings for you. They have been questioning whether they are ready to become the person those feelings require them to be. That is why the night was so restless. Every honest emotion pointed toward responsibility. If they care, they must communicate. If they regret something, they must acknowledge it. If they want closeness, they cannot continue creating distance. If they see a future, they must stop behaving as though the present does not matter. These realizations came one after another. And somewhere between the darkness of night and the first suggestion of morning, your soulmate understood something that changed the entire meaning of their sleeplessness. They were not lying awake simply because they missed you. They were lying awake because a decision was forming. Do not rush past that. A decision was forming. Not necessarily a dramatic decision that transforms everything overnight. Real emotional change is often quieter than that. Sometimes it begins with one person becoming unwilling to continue repeating the same pattern. Last night, your soulmate became tired of their own emotional hiding place. They began seeing how many times fear had disguised itself as logic. I should wait. It is probably better not to say anything. They might not feel the same. I need more certainty. Maybe tomorrow. Each sentence once sounded reasonable. Last night, each one sounded like another doorway through which time had escaped. And something inside them whispered, "How many tomorrows do you think you have?" That thought would not leave. They turned over. Closed their eyes. Opened them again. Looked at the time. Tried to distract themselves. Perhaps they played something in the background or scrolled without truly seeing what was on the screen. Yet underneath every distraction was the same emotional current. You. But there is another layer, and this is where the story becomes more complicated. Your soulmate was not only remembering what they wish they had said to you. They were remembering something you said to them. A sentence. A small sentence that may have seemed ordinary when it happened. They had not understood its importance then. Last night, they did. Perhaps you spoke from a place of sincerity and they were too guarded to recognize it. Perhaps you told them something about trust, timing, loyalty, patience, or honesty. Perhaps you expressed a feeling and then moved on because you did not want to pressure them. Whatever the exact words were in this fictional story, the emotional meaning remained inside them like a sealed letter. Last night, the seal broke. Suddenly they understood that you had shown them something real. And they had responded with uncertainty. That memory created a wave of regret. Not crushing regret. Not hopeless regret. The kind that asks a person to become better. They began replaying your face, your tone, your emotional energy. They wondered whether you had walked away from that moment believing they did not care. They wondered whether their silence had accidentally told you a story that was never true. Then they whispered something quietly to themselves. I wish they knew. Those words carried more weight than they expected. I wish they knew I was afraid. I wish they knew I noticed everything. I wish they knew I wanted to say more. I wish they knew my silence was not the whole truth. And perhaps most importantly, I wish they knew they mattered. This is why you must not confuse every delay with rejection. At the same time, you must never place your life on hold waiting for someone to find courage. Your path is still yours. Your peace still matters. Your future cannot be built entirely around another person's hesitation. What is meant to grow in your life must meet you with honesty, effort, and mutual respect. That is the deeper spiritual lesson hidden inside this night. You are not being asked to chase. You are being asked to remain open without abandoning yourself. There is power in that balance. Your soulmate may be waking up emotionally, but your purpose is not to drag them toward you. Their awakening belongs to them. Their choices belong to them. Their courage must become their own. If they come forward, let it be because they decided truth was worth the risk, not because you exhausted yourself trying to convince them. Last night may have been the beginning of that courage. Because something unexpected happened near the end of their sleeplessness. They stopped asking whether they should feel what they feel. Instead, they asked what they were going to do about it. That is a very different question. For so long, their mind had been trapped in analysis. Why do I feel this? Should I feel this? Is this safe? Is this real? What does it mean? But analysis can become a maze where a person walks in circles while calling it progress. Last night, they finally saw the maze. And for the first time, they wanted a door. They thought about reaching out again. This time, the urge felt different. Earlier, they wanted relief from missing you. Now they wanted honesty. Earlier, they wanted to know whether you still cared. Now they were asking whether they had shown you that they cared. Earlier, they were focused on what they might lose. Now they were thinking about what they might finally give. That shift matters. Because mature connection begins when a person stops asking only, "What will I receive?" and starts asking, "What truth am I willing to bring?" Your soulmate has something they want to bring to you. But they are still afraid of how you will receive it. They do not know whether you will be warm, distant, surprised, skeptical, relieved, or completely unmoved. They do not know whether too much time has passed. They do not know whether you have already made peace with the silence. And this uncertainty is creating another struggle inside them. They are standing emotionally between confession and retreat. One step forward. one old fear pulling backward. But there is one thing they know now that they did not fully accept before. Doing nothing is also a choice. Silence creates outcomes. Delay creates distance. Avoidance writes its own ending. That realization disturbed them enough that sleep became impossible. As dawn moved closer, their emotions softened. The panic of overthinking began to fade, and something more honest replaced it. They stopped imagining dramatic scenarios. They stopped rehearsing every possible response you might give. For a few quiet minutes, they simply allowed themselves to admit the truth. I care about them. No defense. No explanation. No condition. Just that. And when they admitted it, something inside them became still. Not completely peaceful, but clear. They realized they had spent so much energy trying to control the outcome that they had forgotten the value of simply being truthful. Truth cannot guarantee a relationship. Truth cannot force timing. Truth cannot control another heart. But truth can free a person from pretending. And last night, your soulmate became exhausted from pretending. Perhaps not publicly. Perhaps nobody around them knows. They may wake today and appear completely normal. They may move through their responsibilities exactly as usual. They may respond to people with the same voice and wear the same expression. But internally, something has shifted. They have crossed a private line. Before last night, they could tell themselves they were confused. Now they know they are emotionally involved. Before last night, they could blame circumstances. Now they see their own fear inside the story. Before last night, they could assume there would always be another opportunity. Now they understand opportunities can change. And there is something else. Something they remembered near morning that they had almost forgotten. A promise they once made to themselves. Long before you became part of this emotional story, your soulmate had decided they never wanted to become someone who allowed fear to choose their life. Perhaps they had watched people around them miss opportunities because they were afraid. Perhaps they had experienced regret before. Perhaps they had promised themselves that if something truly mattered, they would eventually be brave enough to face it. Last night, that old promise returned. And you were standing at the center of it. They realized this is no longer only about romance. It is about who they want to be. The version of themselves who hides forever? Or the version who finally says, "This matters to me"? The version who keeps waiting for certainty? Or the version who understands that courage often begins before certainty arrives? The version who watches a meaningful connection fade from a distance? Or the version who steps forward with honesty and accepts whatever truth comes back? Their sleepless night became a mirror. And they did not completely recognize the person staring back. Because beneath all the caution, there was more courage than they thought. Beneath the silence, there were more words than they admitted. Beneath the confusion, there was a truth they had known for some time. You affected them. Deeply. Not because you are perfect. Not because they have created some fantasy where every difficulty disappears. You affected them because something about the connection touched a part of them that ordinary interactions do not reach. You made them reflect. You made them question. You made them feel seen. And perhaps without realizing it, you made them imagine what emotional honesty could look like. This is why last night became impossible to sleep through. Their soul was tired of avoiding a conversation their heart had already begun. But now I must tell you the part that changed the atmosphere of the entire night. Just before they finally began drifting towards sleep, your soulmate made a quiet decision. They decided they would not allow the story to remain exactly as it is. They did not yet know what form their next step would take. A message. A conversation. A small gesture. An unexpected opening. Perhaps something far subtler than you would imagine. But somewhere inside them, they chose movement over paralysis. And that would already be enough to make this night important. Except something else happened. Something they saw. Something connected to you. Something they were not expecting to encounter at that hour. It may have been a reminder, a message, an old photograph, a forgotten conversation, a name appearing somewhere unexpectedly, or another small detail that felt strangely timed. Whatever it was, they froze for a moment. Because it answered the exact question they had been asking themselves. Their heart accelerated. They sat up. They looked again just to make sure they had not misunderstood. And suddenly the decision they had been quietly considering no longer felt distant. It felt immediate. What they discovered did not give them every answer. But it gave them enough. Enough to realize that the next chapter between you may depend on something they have been afraid to say aloud. And as morning approached, with the room still dark and their phone held tightly in their hand, your soulmate began typing the first words of a message they had imagined sending you countless times before. This time, however, they did not immediately erase it. Because the sentence they wrote was not casual. It was not small talk. It was not an excuse. It was the beginning of the truth. And the words they chose were about to reveal why you were the one thought they could not escape all night.